The story begins with the image of an extraordinarily fierce battle that has just taken place, with countless corpses strewn across the ground. Here, the blond man turned and spoke to the young man standing behind him. Ash, is that you? This man was Roderick. He continued, I assigned you the Eastern Conquest campaign. So why are you here? He looked utterly miserable now and replied coldly, I'm here to kill you. Those words made Roderick narrow his eyes slightly, a flash of anger appearing. From the start you planned to use my unit as bait, then discard us after exploiting us. A flash of determination lit his eyes. Am I wrong, father? The man responded in a cold voice. Isn't that the only value of a wingless like you? Isn't it, my foolish son Ash Elmheim? The Elmheim family is the strongest military house on the continent. They have dedicated their swords to protecting the royal line for generations. The head of the Elmheim house, Ash Elmheim, is the only one in the kingdom who possesses 7 wings. On an impulse, he saved me when I was near death in a blizzard. So I did everything I could to repay that life-saving favor. Yet, images of his childhood surfaced. Back then he was always bullied by his siblings. They taunted him. A wingless, with no sigil to show, don't dream too big. He told himself inwardly, I have no wings to repay father. The more wings one possessed, the greater the surface energy. As the only person in the ducal household unable to use magic, I was called the wingless. Even so, I clung to my sword with reckless abandon. I trained madly without pause, pushing myself each day and believing that one day this loyalty would be rewarded. Back in the present, not long before, he and his whole squad had been ambushed. After an intense fight, he alone returned in the most pitiful state. He said to his father, I followed you, trusted you until now. Is this your answer? The man maintained his stance, a common tool. What right do many have to demand expectations? You are repulsive to look at. Leave immediately. Hearing that, all warmth in his heart dried up. He gripped his sword tightly and lunged straight at Roderick. He blamed himself. How foolish I was to have believed someone like him. His first strike came. The man did not dodge, but merely smiled and took it, as if repaying a favor. Immediately after, from behind, 2 subordinates approached and bound him with magical chains. Unable to use magic, he could only watch helplessly as they attacked. Parts of his body began to fall away. The extreme pain washed over him, stripping sensation from his body. He coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood in helplessness. The blonde turned back and sneered. Still don't get it, dear brother? After all, a merged wingless is still just cattle on the ground like that. He ground his teeth in anger and cursed. If you always intended to throw me away, then why save me in the first place? The man stepped before him and spat out bitter words. Don't flatter yourself. From the beginning, I never needed someone like you. What I needed was the power of the 7 wings that exist within you. This surprised him a little. 7 wings? The man continued. Your mother was indeed useful. She bore a seed like you solely to serve me. Saying that, he turned and left. He reached out and cried in helplessness. Wait, what are you saying? Answer me, Roderick. Before he could get an answer, his 2 brothers lunged from behind with gleeful looks. After losing consciousness from excessive blood loss, he now felt the cold pains spreading from inside his body. It's so cold. Am I going to die here? After everything I've been through, what have I been living for every single day? Everything is pure white and vaguely warm. Is this the other world? By some miracle, he was now in the form of a child. Unable to bear the cold, he sneezed. He then realized something. No, this isn't reality. So where am I? And is this small body really me? Like the body of a newborn. Am I truly a newborn? He glanced at the person next to him, clutching him tightly. This woman, is she dead? In that blizzard, a group of people were frantic, searching for something. We must find that woman at all costs. She can't have gotten far in this blizzard. For Lord Roderick, we must recover the infant she took. All their distant words suddenly echoed in his head, startling him. What was that just now? And did they say Lord Roderick? Is he hunting a baby? Could that person be me? I remember being picked up on a snowy night like this. Could I have returned to the past? What absurd thing is happening? The pounding of hooves continued all around. He reassured himself. I'll verify later. If I stay here, I'll surely fall into the ducal family's hands. His arm strained forward as he tried to move. His whole body emanated a golden yellow mana filled with determination. I have to get out of here. As far as possible, as fast as I can. But as a newborn, he couldn't move very far. Damn, I'm so exhausted from breathing. His limbs burned as if on fire. Even if I have to crawl, I will survive. I must live, and I will make Lord Roderick pay. He continued crawling unconsciously. After struggling for a while, he fell asleep from exhaustion in the white snow. After a moment, a pair of small feet approached him. The white-haired girl turned and said, "Father." The white-haired man was Viscount Heitfried. He looked at him and exclaimed, "Good heavens, how is there a child in a place like this?" Holding the child, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. A baby has traveled such a long way. Who exactly is this child? A vague scene and a distant voice appeared. Where is this? Alfin's childhood images gradually came into focus. This child has come to meet him. At that moment, Aster suddenly jerked awake. The aftertaste of the dream stayed with him, and he blurted out. The angel Alfin peered in, delightedly exclaiming, "Sis," the boy opened his eyes. Flair, standing beside him, frowned and warned, "Hey, don't tease him. If you pull his cute nose, it might fall off." Immediately after, Aster began to thrash excitedly, alarming the other children. What the hell is going on? Aster didn't stop there. He rubbed his cheek against Friend's sleeve, making her scream, "No, don't." Aster struggled violently and leapt out of everyone's arms. He crawled forward with all his might as if trying to grab something ahead. Flair was horrified to see this. Damn it. What on earth is going on? The girl picked Alfin up and hurried after him. Standing there and seeing the chaos behind, Aster couldn't understand why they were chasing him. Before long, he gritted his teeth, channeling all his mana, and stretched his body forward. His pupils glowed strangely bright. Then the small body of Aster was lifted by a mysterious energy. I'm flying. This is mana. Aster tried to flip himself to change the situation in time. But the mysterious power vanished, and his body plunged downward uncontrollably. I can't control my fall. By reflex, Aster squeezed his eyes, shut in fear, and couldn't look. Just then a man appeared and caught him. Now you're falling from the sky too? Truly a strange child. Aster widened his eyes and looked back, recognizing the man as Hefried. He was the brother of Duke Roderick. Upon realizing this, Aster's inner voice whispered, "No way. Don't tell me this is another branch of the Elmheim family." A fragment of memory surfaced. Hefried, head of the Viscount's house, a cadet branch of the Elmheim family, had once stood beside his brother Roderick. He was one of the two trusted pillars responsible for protecting the royal line. But the Viscount Aster knew had died in the Civil War, along with the extinction of his entire house. Now I'm certain. After piecing everything together, Aster was stunned to realize he had truly returned to the past. Aster sighed helplessly. I tried to escape the ducal family, and now I've been picked up by his brother. Later, Aster lay snugly in a woman's arms. She looked at him with worry. Did the child's mana surge and make him fly? It seems so. I already knew he wasn't an ordinary baby. Then the corner of her mouth lifted slightly in a friendly smile. The woman hugged Aster tightly and reassured him. You must have been so scared. You're safe now. Hearing that, he only stared wide-eyed, not understanding. Hefried, standing beside them, also looked on and smiled unconsciously. He gently reached out and touched Aster, then softly said, "This child carries unimaginable power." Hefried lifted the boy's clothes to reveal the pattern on his back and remarked, "This mark is proof." The woman saw the mark and frowned in shock. This is the 7 wings. Aster himself was astonished when he saw the mark. Why has this appeared on my body? No sooner had he spoken than his pupils dilated as if recalling something. He remembered Roderick's words from his previous life. What we need is the power of the 7 wings within you. Upon realizing this, he was momentarily stunned. I see. Aster then recalled the scene from that snowy night. Roderick had lifted Aster up to achieve his goal. Thinking it all through, he clenched his fist in furious anger. He saved me only to steal the 7 wings. No wings at all? He tore someone else's wings off with his own hands. And yet he dares to speak like that. The woman suddenly hugged him tightly and looked worried. She glanced at Hefried's face and asked cautiously, "What should we do with this child?" A premonition surged in his head. This isn't good. His small hand clenched. I can't let this power fall into the Elmheim family. I need this power to take my revenge on him. Hefried thought for a moment, then decided, I will adopt this child. Those words dissolved Aster's tension and left him staring in astonishment. Hefried gently reached his hands toward Aster. He softly patted his head and observed, this child is currently like a fledgling that can't fly yet. Until the day he chooses to take flight by his own will, I will be responsible for raising him. Hearing that, Aster widened his eyes in disbelief. At that moment, Martha and Flair suddenly tumbled to the ground. Seeing the children appear one by one, Hefried asked seriously, "Did you hear it?" Martha sat up and murmured softly, "We were only worried about the child." Hefried could only sigh. Flair excitedly ran to the woman. The little girl looked at Aster eagerly. "What is this baby's name?" The woman smiled and thought for a moment. "Let's see." She then lifted him up and named him Aster, the name of a new star born into our house. Time passed swiftly until 10 years later. As they arrived at the school, a man showed respect. "We have been expecting you, Viscount Hefried." At that moment, Aster's mysterious carriage appeared. As he stepped down from a carriage, he walked with complete confidence. Aster carefully and tactfully helped Alfin down. "Watch your step, Alfin." She smiled in reply. "Thank you, Aster." Aster smiled as he watched Alfin's lively figure. Then he took up his sword and followed behind Alfin. The Sword Gala, an annual high society event hosted by a famed ducal house under Elmheim for the martial nobility. On the surface, it's where houses strengthen ties, but it's also a stage for each family to showcase promising young swordsmen. Soon the two reached Hefried's rear, those who bore the family's glory. Hefried led the way, Aster and Alfin following with imposing bearing. Whispers circulated among the students. "Look, the Viscounts arrived. Here to be a joke again? I heard they couldn't produce an heir, so they adopted some nameless brat from who knows where. How long will they keep dragging the Elmheim name through the mud?" Aster walked by calmly, surprising everyone. "So that's the kid?" Seeing he seemed bothered, Alfin urged him strongly, "Don't mind them." She squeezed his hand tightly and warned, "Here, show even a hint of weakness, and you'll be crushed immediately." Aster walked on with an impassive face beside Alfin's hand, trembling with anger. Hefried lowered his voice and admonished, "This is the current standing of our Viscount's house." After a moment's hesitation, he turned to the boy with a look of trust. "I want you to see it with your own eyes." He glanced at Aster's ice-cold expression and asked, "Are you disappointed?" The corner of his mouth lifted in a faint smile, his tone firm. "No, father. This coldness suits me." Hefried laughed proudly at that. Good. In his previous life, branded the Elmheim family's shame, he had made the worst possible debut to high society, a place full of bitter memories. Aster gripped his sword with resolute thought. But now that the 7 wings have returned, I am different. Aster's brow furrowed, his gaze as cold as a blade fixed on the target. Just then, Hefried, Alfin, and Aster all looked up toward a classroom window. Through the glass, Darius and Gryan appeared with unfriendly expressions. Aster stared silently, his hand clenching unconsciously. He followed Hefried and said with satisfaction, "Then let's begin a brilliant debut before high society." The sword tournament, the city's central event, erupted, a testament to the era when knights dominated the world. On the arena, swordsmen gripped their blades with determined eyes. His opponent was no weakling either, gritting his teeth as he charged. a knight possessing both strength and presence. The two rushed forward to a direct clash amid the crowd's shouts. Power was swordsmanship. Swiftly, the stronger swordsman knocked his rival aside. Presence was prestige. He advanced coldly, the two again using momentum to strike at each other. And there was one thing that proved a person possessed both. A mark gradually revealed itself on the swordsman's hand, and his eyes flared bright. The swordsman ruthlessly swung his blade, shattering his opponent's sword and leaving him in tatters. In the end, he raised his sword high to the admiration of all. The supreme symbol of them all was the winged mark. The victor was also the one whose winged mark manifested clearly on his body. Alphen in the stands covered her ears, visibly uncomfortable. The place was suffocatingly oppressive. She quietly recalled friends and Flair's faces from earlier and sighed. No wonder they didn't want to come. Meanwhile, Aster only brooded, his face cast down. He suddenly remembered his own miserable scene of losing to Darius. Alphen looked over at Aster and called, "Aster." She asked anxiously, "Are you nervous? After all, this is your first Sword Gala." Contrary to before, he answered confidently, "Actually, no." He thought to himself that if anything existed, it was only a familiar feeling. Alphen looked at Aster, puzzled. Hefried stepped forward at that moment and instructed, "I'm stepping out to attend the banquet for a bit. Watch over Alphen for me." She heard that and was a bit displeased. "Father, I'm much more capable than Aster." He could only smile and reply, "You're clumsy." Hearing that, he placed a hand on Aster's shoulder with expectant eyes. "There are many children your age here. Make connections when you can." Then his expression changed, and he whispered a warning, "And don't let anyone discover the 7 wings." He watched Hefried's retreating back with some hesitation. Father may say that, but he noticed the murderous gazes of everyone fixed on him. Aster sighed in disgust. How was he supposed to make connections in such a blatantly hostile atmosphere? Then he realized something. Alphen was surprised as she watched Aster hurry away. "Aster, where are you going?" He didn't look back and simply replied, "To make friends." Aster walked straight over to Darius and his group of friends. Darius sneered, "Who is this brat?" He raised his voice to introduce himself. "Pleased to meet you, cousin Darius." Aster's face grew increasingly satisfied. "I'm Aster, your younger brother." Aster continued speaking, ignoring his scowl. "I saw you from outside and came to greet you." Brian beside him sneered, "Oh, that adopted kid? The one the Viscount picked up." Darius heard that and laughed with disgust. "I see. No wonder you dare to cheekily call me brother like that." He looked at the two before him with barely contained anger. Darius and Grian, heirs apparent of the Elmheim house, the two who killed him in his previous life. Aster thought silently that they had once seemed terrifying. But now before him, they were just children pretending to be adults, full of ceaseless hatred. At that moment, Alphen suddenly appeared and cut through the tension. She grabbed Aster's hand and said sternly, "Let's go back. Consider them greeted." Darius, seeing her, called out, "Alphen, you're here too?" He teased enthusiastically, "What's this? Not hiding behind your father today." His words grew more obscene. "Come here and entertain us. It's an order from the main house. You know the drill, right?" Alphen shot Darius an angry glare and snapped, "No, thank you. The main house and the branch are not in a master-servant relationship." As Aster was being pulled away, he called, "Sis." Before his words finished, he felt her hand tremble. "I'm not done yet." He felt a pang of sadness at that thought. Darius then arrogantly shouted, "You know what?" He spat slander. Her father is a knight, but he failed to protect the king and must take responsibility. His own brother cut off his arm. Alphen froze for a moment after hearing that, but she refused to stay silent. "Thank God I don't carry that losing bloodline." She shouted angrily, "Take that back." Before Alphen could finish, Darius spat a mouthful of wine in her face. "If you insult my father, I won't." He sneered. "All you produce are useless daughters. You couldn't even produce a male heir. Your father must be so disappointed in you." Then with a sly look he pointed at her and said, "This isn't a ball. Next time we're something you don't mind getting soaked in, or Just throw on some rags. Alfin could only fall silent, clutching her dress in indignation. Aster stood stunned in thought. On the way here, he had still been worried. He looked over each person's face in turn. I think maybe when we meet them again, we won't feel angry anymore. With that thought, Aster took hold of the bottle from their hands. He then moved closer to Alfin and placed a hand on her shoulder. But fortunately, he didn't hesitate to throw the bottle at Darius. Hey, Darius. He snatched the bottle up with some caution. Aster immediately swung his sword and cleaved the bottle in two. May is still a piece of trash as always. Wine splashed all over Darius, leaving him astonished. Huh. Brian beside him cried out anxiously. You? Meanwhile, he casually licked the wine off his sword. It's just grape juice. Then, using the same contemptuous look Darius had shown earlier, he said, It suits leeching nobles like you very well. Turning back the clock 3 years, a piercing cry rang out. Stop him, Aster warned aloud. Are you going to kill my sisters? Stay still. He ordered sternly, stay alert. Witnessing the scene, Hefried was momentarily stunned. So this is the Seven Wings. I never imagined it could contain such dangerous power. He wondered inwardly whether this power could truly be controlled. He himself felt confused and doubting. Both I and you. At that moment, a subordinate ran into the room to report. Viscount, there's an emergency. Those present frowned in discomfort at the unexpected situation. What's happened? We're in the middle of negotiations. The subordinate's voice faltered. After a long pause, he dared to report. The lord of the main house and the branch of Elmheim. Their sons are fighting each other one-on-one. At those words, Hefried grimaced. What? Roderick, however, revealed a deep, inscrutable look. Upon hearing the report, he decisively stood up and left. At the same time, Alfin hurried over. His father paused slightly. Alfin asked what happened. A duke's voice rang out excitedly. Look, he seems very pleased over there. A fratricidal clash within the Elmheim house is not a common sight. There were also a few judgmental glances. No matter how this match ends. Everyone in the room was suddenly stirred by curiosity. The duke's mouth curled. This sword gala might turn into a disaster. Below in the arena, Darius raised his sword grandly. Dare to pick a fight with the ducal house, what fools. Just a bastard raised in the streets. You don't even grasp the gap in strength. The onlookers witnessing the scene went wild. Look, the four-winged sigil, truly the heir of the ducal house, a completely different class. His face betrayed his smugness. Now, show me your winged sigil. He continued to taunt and challenge. Or are you too ashamed to call yours out after seeing mine? Aster, however, maintained an odd calm, bragging about such a mediocre pattern. He sneered disdainfully. I really wouldn't stoop to that shameful display. That remark completely infuriated Darius. Not wanting to further enrage him, Aster proposed, If I win, you will apologize to my sisters. Agreed, cousin. He agreed heartily at once. Fine. If I win, you'll be my dog. Darius's eyes brimmed with self-confidence. I'll command you for the rest of your life. His attack came so fast that Aster managed to block it. But the force was so great that Aster was shoved backward, sending dust flying everywhere. Aster's hands tightened on his sword even more. Darius sneered arrogantly. This is the power of one who possesses it. With that, he lunged forward like a storm. Seeing this, Alfin couldn't help but worry. Aster. The sharp-haired count thought Darius's swordsmanship was still immature. Looking at the current situation, however poor the technique, the overwhelming mana of the winged sigil made up for everything. To compare, if the mana of one wing is like a candlelight, the sealed mana within 4 wings is an explosion. The more they fought, the more Darius's momentum rose. Where did your spirit go? He kept taunting. Didn't you say you'd make me apologize? Or was that just hot air? He shouted. Show me your power then. Watching from above, the blonde duke was slightly taken aback. Is the match over already? The tip of Aster's sword swept across, and he managed to parry the powerful blow. This made Darius goggle in surprise. What? He replied coldly. You talk too much. With that, Aster used his strength to fling his cousin up into the air. Now his presence radiated an overwhelmingly dominant aura. Aster thought to himself, "For 10 years I've learned to control mana at the Viscount's home, all to wait for this one chance to take revenge on you." A sharpness flashed in his eyes. The next strike unhesitatingly aimed straight at Darius's head, leaving him no time to react. Pressed, his legs buckled against the cold ground. Those around could only stare in astonishment. Yet Darius, being forced back, couldn't understand it himself. "But I have 4 wings." Aster remained silent, not uttering a single word. Darius's sword seemed on the verge of snapping in two. The mana being released was immense. Only now did the crowd erupt. Could he actually be about to win? They whispered that Darius was being completely overwhelmed, with no chance to counter. Everyone felt goosebumps. Does the Elmheim house still harbor such a monster? As his assault continued, Hefried's mood turned anxious. This is bad. Darius gritted his teeth and endured. He tried to recall what had happened in the past. He stammered out, "Hey, stop!" A shout rang out from above as well. "No!" Aster emitted an enormous burst of power. Everyone was treated to a spectacular display. Darius's sword, astonishingly, snapped cleanly in two. After it was over, he added, "Next time you should wear something cheap." Aster emphasized each word, "Something that doesn't mind getting soaked." His cousin realized he was no longer wingless. Alfin looked at him and smiled with satisfaction. Up to now, just recognizing that was enough to clear my head. Suddenly, Aster's pupils contracted. A pressing source of power was slowly approaching. He flinched. The true enemy had only now appeared. It was Roderick. Whispers kept rising in the hall. Unbelievable. The youngest son of a Viscount's house had actually defeated the third son of the main family's lord. Amid the commotion, slow footsteps advanced. But this had truly gone out of control. There was no way that person would stay silent after having his honor insulted like that. No one else. It was Aster, face grave, the 8th head of the Elmheim main branch. At that moment, Darius let out a slight laugh, his gaze following. One could see Aster step closer to Roderick. He frowned. His face took on a cold look. Before the pressure could force him, he showed no fear. Duke Roderick. Immediately after, Darius hurriedly stood up. He cowardly dropped to his knees before Roderick. "Father!" Darius tattled, repeatedly pointing at Aster. "It's him, the bastard who dared oppose the main branch, even though he's just a filthy half-blood. Please, Father, use your power to teach him a lesson." But those words only enraged Roderick further. He did not reply. Coldly, he acted against him. Darius stared at his hand in panic. That ruthless action by Roderick silenced the entire hall. Even Grian was left utterly shocked. Roderick withdrew his hand, his gaze cold and authoritative. "Why can the loser grin like that? You have shamed our family's honor, one who cannot avenge himself." Hefried, seeing this, shouted in alarm, "No, stop, Roderick." He paid no heed and raised his hand high, unworthy to hold sword. The audience suddenly fell silent. Darius was overcome with fear. Roderick glanced coldly. He was taken aback by Aster's action. "What do you think you're doing?" He kept his composure and calmly explained, "My cousin still hasn't apologized to my sister." Aster's eyes were steady as he spoke plainly. "Please, allow the punishment after that matter is settled, uncle." At those words, Roderick grew even darker. "I've heard you're just an orphan Hefried took in, and yet you actually think you're one of the Elmheims now?" He answered slowly, his voice composed, "I am a son first. Though not by blood, I believe I have learned enough from my father about knight's pride and the family's honor." Hearing the reply, he glanced upward slightly. At once, Roderick exploded further. "Then, as a member of a Viscount's house, you have needlessly disgraced the head of the family, the apex of 12,000 knights, the king's sword, and that pride as well." Those present listened intently to his words. "Surely you understand this is no longer something that can be dismissed as a childish quarrel." Even he was stunned by Roderick's words. "You should be the one who understands that best." He stood above, watching both of them closely. Roderick continued to speak. Your father lost an arm to atone for his betrayal. The blade is now so close to your collar. What are you willing to offer?" He suddenly answered with all due respect. He spoke, his voice hard and unyielding. "This is not a squabble between brothers, but a legitimate duel. I only meet insults to my family with my sword." Roderick frowned more deeply, his sharp gaze unwavering. Aster showed no fear and bluntly retorted, "One who cannot avenge himself does not deserve to hold a sword. That's what you said, isn't it? I have no intention of losing even a finger." Alfin above trembled at his words. He raised an eyebrow, eyes full of interest. "The boy is only 10? Are you kidding?" Despite that, Roderick maintained his stern expression. After a moment, he finally relented and turned slightly away. "I understand." But then Roderick suddenly turned back. "Then take your stance." Aster immediately assumed a guard, ready to respond. The blade swept across, just beside him. He showed no mercy. The force of the strike sent Aster flying. Witnessing that, Alfin covered his mouth in shock. Hefried panicked and shouted immediately, "Roderick!" He angrily swung his sword toward Roderick's back. Calmly, Roderick quickly intercepted that blade. Hefried landed back on the ground safely. Worried, he rushed to the boy. "Aster, are you all right?" Aster, however, saw only a broken sword there. Hefried couldn't believe his eyes. Surprisingly, Aster still stood firm. Though covered in wounds, his gaze remained resolute. Roderick coldly glanced at that stubbornness, said nothing, and turned away. Roderick's face was gloomy, his hands clenched tight. As he walked away, Aster lost his balance and staggered down. Hefried anxiously caught him. "Aster, Aster." He struggled to speak. "I kept my promise to you, father, my vow, and everything." Hefried frowned at his reckless son. "You did very well." Roderick climbed the stairs slowly, step by step. He stood there waiting and couldn't help teasing him. That was rather childish. Roderick showed no fear. He calmly analyzed. "But if that boy is allowed to speak so, the head of the main branch will lose all face. So ending it there seems reasonable, does it not?" Even he couldn't stop praising Aster. Facing Duke Roderick directly, he still stood and survived. The boy truly is a prodigy. He happily stroked his chin at the boy. That was the perfect debut for high society. The man beside him then spoke up. "Even so, I was quite frightened. I thought Elmheim might tear itself apart right here." Roderick looked at the two, his eyes bloodshot. "An era of upheaval will come." He spoke slowly. "A storm so fierce it could tear this world into 2 or 3 pieces." The next morning, the sky was clear, white clouds drifting prominently across the blue. A man stood with his mouth agape, clearly astonished. He was utterly surprised that a small Aster could defeat veteran soldiers. He curled the corner of his mouth into a small smile. "Truly remarkable," he exclaimed with joy. "Young Master Aster." The soldiers behind, witnessing it, exclaimed in surprise. "Incredible skill. Only 10 years old and already at this level. It's terrifying." He replied excitedly. "Since the Sword Gala, his training intensity has been even more brutal. That must be a huge motivation." With a confident expression, he added, "Besides, did you hear? The young master defeated Duke Roderick's 3rd son." They were very satisfied, since that main branch had looked down on us for years. This was truly gratifying. Meanwhile, from mind to gaze, Aster clearly showed a hunger for victory. At the Sword Gala, I had displayed my full strength and presence. At least that was enough to silence the taunts. The Viscount's family is Elmheim's shame. But the real obstacle remains the head of Elmheim. I truly want to know my true limits. I want to test myself on that stage again. His face hardened, brows knitting slightly, showing clear confidence. At my current level, I cannot defeat Roderick. Amid the raging whirlwinds, Aster suddenly understood. The winged seal is ultimately only a measure of the latent magical power within the body. Innate talent is just a wasted treasure if you cannot control it. Yet I still cannot unleash the power of the 7 wings. He swung the weapon in his hand hard. If only I didn't have to worry about losing control. If only I could test the seven wings' power to its limit. A decisive sweep tore the ground open, flinging opponents away. Aster's gaze darkened, cold and resolute. The last sword fell. His voice rang out challengingly. Anyone else next? In the blink of an eye, Aster had defeated all the opposing soldiers. From the back, a sharp female voice called out, "You fought really well today." Alphen tilted her head, faintly smiling, her words sounding reproachful. "You really don't know restraint. Aster, your father is calling you." Among the fallen bodies, he walked away quietly. "Father, yes, I'm coming." As he passed her, Aster paused, eyes briefly surprised. That outfit. Alphen turned slightly, her face calm, but her eyes full of scrutiny. Aster didn't hesitate and continued bluntly. "Rarely see you wear that. Didn't you say you hated it because it's not cute?" Alphen sighed softly, her tone even. "Everything needs balance, right? Looking at you, I realized I can't stand still forever either." Then she pointed a wooden sword at him as a warning, clearing her throat. Half joking, half serious. "When you return, you'll have to spend more time with me." Hearing that, Aster couldn't help but laugh out loud. He raised both hands to the sky in a gesture. "Go easy on me, okay?" Aster stood at the door, knocked lightly on the panel, then pushed it open and stepped in. "May I come in?" Hefried tilted his head slightly, his expression cold. "I called you. Sit down." Aster sat down hesitantly before the heavy atmosphere in the room. He leaned back in his chair, eyes showing a hint of weariness. "It's been 10 years since you joined our family." Suddenly Hefried produced a precious heirloom to Aster's astonished gaze. "I intended to wait until you were a bit older, but—" He stared at it, his mind in turmoil. "This is—" He frowned, eyes serious. "Proof of the family's successor." Aster High Fai calmly requested, "I want you to inherit the Viscountcy." At his unexpected proposal, Aster's whole body went rigid. "As you know, the status of the Viscount's family is very delicate." Hefried explained gently. "Despite our flaws, we are still an Elmheim cadet branch, lords guarding our domain. There are many things we must protect." He showed concern. "I cannot leave the future head of the family position vacant forever." Still, Aster looked quite anxious. "Will the sisters agree?" Hefried soothed him quietly. "Your sisters are studying at the Knight Academy. They'll return in 3 days. I plan to speak with them then." He worried. "Sister Martha and Sister Kudo are coming back?" Aster's face darkened. "If so, they won't be pleased. Especially Sister Kudo. She'll be furious." He stated plainly, "She hates me because I was born a son by accident and happened to possess the power of the seven wings." Aster flatly refused immediately, his voice edged with cold. "I cannot agree to this. I cannot control my own magic. I am still the child who almost killed his sister." Aster believed he lacked the confidence to face his sister's wrath. Hefried did not rush to speak, but instead gave a slight smile. After a long pause, he finally said, "There are times I truly wonder whether you're still a child or not." He eagerly set a luxurious wooden box on the table. "This ring is meant as a reward for your performance at the Sword Gala." He studied the box closely, "But perhaps you'll prefer this instead." His eyes involuntarily brightened. Aster looked excited. Hefried explained in a low voice, "Inside is the demonic swordgram, a magical blade that consumes mana. The sword can restrain the power of the seven wings." Hefried led him into a forest. "All right, this place should be fine." Aster asked curiously, "Father, if it's just to test the sword, wouldn't the training hall do?" "No, this is just in case the worst happens." He recalled that when he was little, you tended to wreck the house rather frequently. Hefried raised the sword, eyes solemn. "The demonic sword Graham is a famed heirloom, passed to the legitimate eldest son of the Elmheim family. It was entrusted to the main house's care, but I personally brought it here reserved just for you." A flash of steel gleamed the moment the blade left its sheath. Aster's pupils contracted. His eyes were shaken under the dazzling light. The sword appeared strangely broken, unlike any weapon he had ever seen. "Is this a sword?" "As you can see, it has no blade." A blue radiance coiled around the steel, while deep crimson energy flared violently. The sword transformed immediately. But when you poured mana into it, the red energy condensed, stretched, and warped with each pulse of magic. The sword would be shaped by its wielder's own mana. Mana erupted from the blade, dyeing the ground around it red. A vortex spiraled amid the trees, sucking leaves and rubble into its center. Hefried gripped the sword that burned crimson, his gaze solemn. However, if the user lacks sufficient ability, the sword will drain all their mana. This is a sword with a dark reputation. The flaming sword stopped right before Aster. He asked, "Well, want to try?" Without hesitation, Aster confidently clasped the sword tightly. Flames flared violently behind him, and mana in his hands swirled as if answering a call. My mana poured into this sword. Mana burst forth, golden light ripping the air. This feeling is... In a blazing reflection, red mana surged like a living creature. Is my mana flowing into the sword of its own accord? The red beam shot straight up into the sky. Something had officially been released. The red beam shot straight up into the sky. Something had officially been released. A young man's face went pale. What was that light just now? A meteor fell from the sky? Ah, idiot. On the contrary, something just shot straight up into the heavens. Amid the chaos, Alfin quietly watched them from behind. Something? What do you mean? Without needing to look long, she guessed the origin of the light. Probably Aster. He tightened his grip on the sword, his golden eyes bright with excitement. This sword is truly incredible. Hefried's expression shifted slightly. The incredible thing here is your power. The sky swirled into a massive, rotating ring. Wind and clouds melded together. It is your power, a power beyond the bounds of the entire family. And now it exists within you, the bearer of the Seven Wings sigil. Even by tracing the entire bloodline history of House Elmheim, there has never been anyone like you. One day you will become a swordsman far surpassing me. If you master that power fully, one day you will become a swordsman surpassing me with these 6 pairs of wings and even surpass Roderick. A thought formed in his mind. I'll surpass him. His hand clenched the hilt. Light flashed along the blade. But immense power always breeds conflict. From behind, golden wings of mana unfurled brilliantly. If it were revealed that you possess the 7 wings, the greater your power, the more dangers and enemies there will be. Some will be jealous, some will hate you, and others will conspire to use you for their purposes. And there will be those who want to eliminate you as an obstacle. Hefried held out his hand toward him. When that time comes, you won't have to regret your helplessness. He stretched his hand out under sunlight, filtering through the leaves. Become strong from now on. Aster clasped his hands tightly together. Yes, I will not live another miserable life like in my previous life. Aster looked up, his eyes full of determination. Thank you, Father. I will master the 7 wings and this sword. The whole family stood outside the main hall. 3 days later, welcome home. At the gate, Kadrivka strode forward energetically. The 2 useless Kadrivkas have returned. She covered her mouth with a quiet laugh, mischief flickering across her face. Kadrivka spread her arms wide, her smile radiant and enthusiastic, wanting to hug them all. Come on, my adorable little sisters. Give your beloved sister a warm hug. Both of them ignored Kadrivka and rushed to hug Martha. Welcome home, Sister Martha. Oh my. She froze, turned and scolded. Huh? What about hugging Sister Cud? Both of them grimaced and explained. Because Sister Kudo always messes up our hair. She indignantly spun away, avoiding their gaze. Impossible. A sister who has honed the knightly spirit to perfection would never behave so tactlessly. Seeing Alfin standing nearby, Kadrivka excitedly launched herself into her arms. Alfin, have you been behaving yourself? While hugging and ruffling Alfin's hair. Why did you run over here? Martha looked around, noticed someone missing and asked, Huh? Where's Aster? Hefried hesitated and said, as for the boy. The moment she heard his name, her expression changed. A terrifying beam of light burst out on the far side of the forest. Aster trained frantically on how to control the sword. This mystery. He ground his teeth, sweat pouring down. Damn it, still not right. He focused on the mana he had just produced and studied it carefully. I can shape the sword with mana, but I can only control it to this extent. Aster kept practicing relentlessly, examining the sword closely. He wondered, how can father control it so gently? Suddenly, Kadrivka stepped closer, her tone mocking. What a show-off, huh? Aster asked in surprise. You're back? Sister Kudo didn't even bother to show herself to greet the returning sister. She frowned, teasing, isn't that a bit cold? Her words grew harsher. We're not even worth your concern? Or do you think you're special? I heard everything at the Sword Gala. Even the Knight Academy's been talking about you. Father must be so proud. Still, Aster replied calmly. On the other hand, I heard that even as a trainee you have accomplished numerous outstanding feats on missions. Kadrivka wore the Academy's medal and was the only one to receive this year's honorary Knight medal, the Platinum Medal. She confidently asserted, of course. Otherwise, how could I inherit father's position? Her gaze grew sharp. I heard you refused the succession? Aster anxiously fumbled for a way to handle the situation. Is she trying to warn me? Father already told her. This is really troublesome. It's not like that. She smirked faintly. I just think I'm still lacking right now to take on that position. Each step was decisive and forceful. To be honest, both father and I. Kadrivka drew her sword. Everyone knew what her dream was, yet it's so cruel. What? What are you doing all of a sudden? She decisively chopped down a tall tree beside her, sending it hurtling fiercely toward him. Fortunately, he managed to dodge in time. Aster's eyes showed clear shock. What are you doing all of a sudden? Kadrivka said coldly. Let's see. It's been a while. Let me test your strength a bit. She hoisted the sword onto her shoulder, confident. Next strike, I'll be serious. In contrast, Aster anxiously intervened. Wait, Sister Cud, this sword isn't finished yet. But she didn't believe it. Can you offer the same excuse when facing an enemy on the battlefield? Aster laughed loudly. The enemy. Kadrivka dropped into a stance, her eyes full of fierce desire. A knight must always consider himself standing on the battlefield. If you hold back, I'll crush you. Understand? He stared in dismay, worried. This is not a joke. He watched her lunge at him with the sword in hand. It took all his effort to keep his mana from erupting right then. His eyes turned cold, but he had no other choice. If not, she really would. He tried to absorb the force. Otherwise, Kadrivka would kill him. The whole forest immediately erupted into chaos. The scenery was thrown into disarray. Kadrivka kept driving her sword forward. Your swordsmanship is as sharp as ever. Huh? I didn't expect you could keep up with my blade, especially after I refined it at the Knight Academy. She continued. But what the hell is that half-baked swordsmanship of yours? Kadrivka swung powerfully, sending Aster reeling back. Your mana control is a complete mess. He tried to land his feet safely on the ground. Aster couldn't believe it and immediately shouted. Sister Kadrivka showed no mercy. He suddenly thought to himself in memory that she had always been like that. Just because I'm the only boy in the Viscount's family with inheritance rights. Aster recalled the times from his childhood. And because she is a special existence, possessing a winged sigil superior to anyone in the family. He also remembered when Kadrivka chased him, a sister like a storm, always finding excuses to call him unjust and challenge him. But before Aster finished thinking, she vanished. To be frank, she is my nemesis. A voice suddenly rang out, startling him. So it is you, Aster. Kadrivka suddenly appeared from above. She swung her sword with all her might, her voice steely. You are not worthy to become the next head of this family. Over here, Martha calmly looked out the window. Father, is it okay to leave those two like that? She fretted, watching her father closely. In the worst case, this quarrel between siblings will end with a corpse. You know that, right? But Hefried showed no worry. In their own way, they are perfect rivals. Though reckless, it won't lead to such a tragic outcome. Martha frowned slightly. I hope you're right, Father. She then slowly stepped closer, returning to the main topic. Father, why did you call us back from the Night Academy? Surely, it isn't just to discuss succession, right? Hefried gently took something from the table. It was indeed so. Martha was truly stunned, unable to believe her eyes. He produced this. It was a letter, a summons from House Elmheim. It seemed the ruling elders of the clan wanted to see their grandchild in person. She lowered her eyes and rubbed her chin thoughtfully. This is indeed a serious matter. Hefried's face grew grave as he glanced. In the worst case, we could lose him. Meanwhile, Aster tried to argue back. Don't talk nonsense. I've already refused the succession. You heard that too, right, Kadrivka? However, Kadrivka showed no mercy, and that's what infuriated her. She decisively swung her sword toward Aster. It was too heavy. He inwardly sighed, feeling like he was fighting a troll wielding a warhammer. His hands suddenly twisted lightly and agilely. The movement caused Kadrivka to lunge forward. He raised his sword high and shouted, "Will you listen to me?" Unfazed by the flurry of actions, she said, "You're just running away, aren't you?" Kadrivka calmly swung her sword with finality. The fierce force sent him staggering, his back slamming against a tree. What monstrous strength is this? Her blade continuously accumulated mana. Merely swinging the sword is third-rate. Kadrivka calmly pronounced, controlling mana is second-rate. Only by mastering the way of the magic blade is one considered first-rate. That gaze could not hide its contempt. How disappointing. Aster. Kadrivka slowly began to explain. The difference in wing sigils directly reflects the amount of mana we can contain. They say one wing difference means power triples. Then she held up 2 fingers. In other words, in terms of magical firepower and stamina, my 5-wing second rank is completely inferior to your 7-wing. Kadrivka's teasing voice rang out. Yet you dodge direct clashes with that cowardly sword style you favor. She curled a corner of her mouth in a playful smile. Can't you trust your own power to reach the ideal realm of swordsmanship? Kadrivka suddenly brought up the past. Or are you afraid you'll lose control again like 3 years ago? At that, Aster realized with a jolt. Afraid? Me? Afraid of the power of the 7 wings. He looked at the sword in his hand and thought to himself, I never considered that. Have I been unconsciously suppressing my own power? Doubt rose in Aster's heart. Was the instability of this sword because he had forcibly repressed his mana? Before he could think further, Kadrivka used mana. Aster, you have everything I've longed for. She gripped the sword tightly. If you let that fortune rot away without realizing it, then I have the right to be arrogant. Then, without hesitation, she charged, give it all to me. Aster refused to yield and assumed a defensive stance. 2 powerful currents of mana immediately collided. Seeing that, she panicked and couldn't help shouting, It repelled my full power strike. Aster calmly said slowly, Thank you, sister. You've made me come to my senses. Watching him rush forward, Kadrivka thought inwardly, He charges without needing to shape the blade? She panicked and tried to swing her sword forward. Impossible! It exhausted its mana in that last attack. At that moment, Aster thought to himself, the infinite mana source hidden within the 7 wings. He quietly calculated his next move. I can't fully control it yet. But just in this instant, it doesn't keep the sword shape and channels all the mana into the attack timing. Kadrivka suddenly smiled. So you did come up with some method after all. You idiot. Aster suddenly murmured something. This second life I happened to gain. A strange mana sigil suddenly appeared behind him. I will never waste it, nor this power. Aster recalled what mattered most to him, both the sword and the family. No matter how much he gained, it still felt like starting from nothing. Those words left Kadrivka bewildered. A second life? He concentrated a dense flow of mana. Because of that, Aster decisively aimed straight at her sword. He suddenly vanished, causing Kadrivka to grow suspicious. She stammered afterward. The sword disappeared as if it were someone else. Aster whispered softly, "I will no longer hold back." Only then did Kadrivka sense something different. She jolted, widening her eyes in astonishment. Kadrivka stood frozen, then slowly said, "Is this my room?" A voice suddenly rang out. "Finally awake, huh?" She immediately replied, "Sister Martha, I overslept." Kadrivka sprang up abruptly. Then, remembering the duel with Aster, she wondered what had actually happened. But Martha cheerfully told her, "Aster carried you back here." As she spoke, she drew the curtain. "He said you nodded off in the middle of the fight. He guessed it was because you were tired from the long journey." She glanced at the sword. Something was off. Kadrivka thought to herself, troubled. At the last moment, she had believed Aster had cut her down. She couldn't help but marvel at what had happened. In truth, before the clash, Aster had dispelled that mana blade. Kadrivka herself could feel only the remnants of that mana skim across her body. Thinking it over, there was no way Aster would kill his own sister. She couldn't suppress the doubt in her heart. But at that moment, she had truly believed she was going to be killed. Kadrivka suddenly smiled. "He's truly an insufferable little brother, even though he's clearly much smaller than me." Then she suddenly grabbed the sword. "Sister Martha, is Aster heading into battle again this time?" Kadrivka aggressively tossed the blanket. "I won't accept that match." Martha unexpectedly interjected, "If it's Aster, he's already gone." "I know." That remark left her completely stunned. Martha calmly explained, "There's a summons from the main house addressed directly to Aster. So what about Father earlier? Didn't you know?" Her face now showed utter bewilderment. She cried out in panic, "I never heard about that." At that moment, the carriage sped along the road. Aster calmly gazed out the window. Hefried slowly warned, "The people we are about to meet are the elders who silently assist House Elmheim like shadows." He continued to explain, "The former heads of the main house and branches, or the senior predecessors under Elmheim. Those who still hold immense influence even after withdrawing from the forefront. The rulers in the shadows." Then Hefried sighed with worry. "Those elders have never shown interest since I adopted you. Yet now they summon you at this time." Aster merely turned his head calmly. Perhaps it's because of the incident at the Sword Dance Festival. He quietly recounted what he knew. The old men of Elmheim value the family's reputation more than money, honor, even life itself. I've heard that. And those who tarnish that reputation are thrown into a beast cage as prey for them. When those words ended, Hefried looked at his son with worry. "Aster, where did you hear those rumors?" He awkwardly explained, "From somewhere long ago. In any case, I'm prepared to be executed or exiled." The man frowned, studying him. "Are you really okay? Going out with no escort?" But Aster answered very calmly, "It's fine. I originally planned to leave right when my sisters arrived." He smiled and turned his head gently. "Especially with Kudo. If I, the one she hates, weren't around, she'd be free to spread her wings and fly." Then Aster lightly touched the sword. "Because of Kudo, I've begun to see how to master this gram." He frowned, gripping the sword. "I feel I can draw more of the seven wings power than before. So whatever happens to me from now on, please don't save me." Aster continued, "I'm ready to survive on my own." Hefried's brows knitted ever tighter. "Aster, you..." But a voice suddenly rang out. "Survive on your own?" The youngest acting all proud and pretentious. Aster couldn't help but be surprised by that voice. He stared in disbelief. Outside the window, Kadrivka had suddenly appeared. "Sister Kudo, what are you doing here?" She paid no heed to Aster's words. "Don't tell me you ran all the way here, okay?" Kadrivka calmly climbed inside. "Aren't you cruel? Leaving quietly without saying a word to your sister." She spoke sulkily. "I've heard everything. You've been summoned by the great elders of the main house, right? Even Martha and I have never been summoned once." Hefried hastily interrupted, embarrassed. "Kadrivka, I think you understand, but taking you to the main house." She gently sat down beside Aster. "I understand." I heard Father called us here to oversee things while he's away. I understand perfectly. Kadrivka cast a cold sideways glance. But this summons means something's happening, so we must be that cautious. Her voice rang again. Martha already said it. You know, Asta might not come back. Hearing that, Aster gently reassured. You're exaggerating. I'm only going to meet them and talk. Whether I return safely is another matter. Then Kadrivka suddenly pointed directly at his face. Listen, Aster, I hate you a lot. Her sharp accusations followed one after another. Because you're a man, because of the 7 wings, because you're always treated specially. Because you're stronger than me, your sister, and because you act like the adult even though you're just a little brother. All those things. Aster looked at his sister in bewilderment, his heart full of questions. The next words from Kadrivka made them both pay close attention. But even so, you're still my precious family. No matter how strong you are, no matter how much you act like an adult, you're still my little brother. She suddenly stood up. So come back properly, and then we'll have a rematch. Kadrivka decisively threw the door wide open. If you retreat while you're ahead, I won't forgive you. Without another word, she suddenly jumped out of the carriage. Aster could only look on helplessly. What did she come here for? Hefried's eyes softened slightly as he quietly praised. She's quite a good rival, isn't she? In his heart he thought, but thank you, sister. Watching her figure recede, his heart burned with determination. I will definitely return. No sooner had they arrived than a clear voice rang out. Welcome back, Lord Hefried. The soldier said coldly. The chief elder is waiting for you inside. Hefried curtly refused. No guide is necessary. I know the way. Nevertheless, the man replied nonchalantly. I'm afraid that won't do, sir. I've been ordered to escort both of you in personally. He watched them intently, thinking to himself, sure enough, they didn't summon me out of fondness for my grandchildren. At least the atmosphere here doesn't feel that way. Aster observed quietly. He cast a glance at the castle. How nostalgic. It's been so long since I returned home. Hefried suddenly said, I'm sure you already know this. His voice was warm and slow as he warned. But today you must not lose your composure, no matter what they say to you. Aster replied indifferently. That depends on their attitude. Hefried shut his eyes in exasperation. That's exactly why I said they're a problem. He went on at length. Listen, the people we're about to meet are... At that moment, Aster's gaze swept across the training yard. He couldn't see Darius anywhere. With his right hand crushed, he probably won't be back on duty soon. Hefried's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Are you listening, Aster? Under his father's stare, Aster replied awkwardly, Yes, of course I am. He stated firmly, Today I will behave and be quiet. After all, my eldest sister warned me it's best to return in one piece. The chamber doors slowly opened. The accompanying soldier immediately announced, Lord Hefried and his son have arrived. A rather unfriendly voice suddenly called out, So you've finally come. It's been over 10 years, hasn't it? The old man continued. Well then, my grandson, Hefried. Hefried promptly knelt and respectfully replied, Long time no see, Lord Luke. He corrected himself. No, ancestor progenitor, rather. Aster cast a quick glance at the man before him. He was the monster lurking in Elmheim's shadows. The sixth head of the clan, Zinnies A. Elmheim. Aster immediately scanned the room and surmised that the others were high-ranking figures under House Elmheim's command. He leisurely looked at each person. He recognized a few faces from the Sword Dance Festival, but a name suddenly flashed through Aster's mind. Is Roderick not here? As if seeing through everything, Zinni spoke. He is not here, brat. The old man explained slowly. He is the captain of the Royal Knights. Zinnies leaned on his cane and continued slowly. He has no time to concern himself with trivial matters like this. That's why these old men are handling internal administrative issues for him. Aster frowned and looked at him. In his previous life, he never even had the chance to meet this man, so he didn't care much. He quietly considered all possibilities. But gathering this many officials without the current head present suggested that Even in retirement, the man still wielded considerable power. Then Hefried suddenly asked, "So what exactly are those trivial matters?" Zinnies replied calmly, "Surely you've already guessed, haven't you?" There was a hint of mockery in his voice. "I heard your pet caused quite an uproar at the sword festival." Anxiety immediately seized Aster. "Just as I thought, it's about that incident." Faced with the accusation, Hefried casually spoke in his son's defense. On that matter, the current head Roderick should have resolved it himself. However, the elders there sneered. That was merely a spectacle to fool the public. It doesn't change the fact that House Elmhaim's reputation has been tarnished. Those venomous words immediately fell upon him. Taking a child of unknown origin into the family was a mistake from the start. We could have turned a blind eye if it remained harmless, but once it dared bear fangs at the clan, it's a different matter. There's no choice but to expel it. And of course, you will not escape appropriate punishment. Lord Hefried, Aster standing beside him, couldn't hold back and immediately retorted, "Wait, I was the one who did it. My father had nothing to do with it." However, Hefried only shook his head slightly, signaling for him to stop. Seeing that, Aster froze. His words stuck bitterly in his throat. Without any mercy, Zinnies continued his criticism. "It seems your upbringing is lacking, allowing a child to intrude upon adult matters." He slowly rose. "We command over 12,000 knights under our banner. We bear the weight of the Elmheim name. However, the knights are not a unified bloc." At Zinnies' words, those around him sneered and glanced contemptuously at them. Countless people watched from the shadows, waiting for a chance to seize the top position. He went on without stopping. "Of course, that includes some of those present in this room." Finishing, Zinnies slowly stepped forward. "We simply want reassurance. We need proof that you are not someone who will harm House Elmheim." He coldly raised the pommel of his sword, placing it close to Hefried's face. He stared in bewilderment. "This is—" Zinnies coldly recalled the past. "Do you remember? When you failed to protect your lord and dragged Elmhaim's honor through the mud. You showed no mercy." He coolly made a proposal. "Right here in this room, you let Roderick chop off an arm." With a sharp gaze, he commanded with authority, "This time prove your loyalty by taking that brat's head." At those words, astonishment showed in Aster's eyes. Not stopping there, Zinnies continued in a venomous tone, "Do that, and all will be forgiven." Despite the pressure, Hefried firmly objected. "I refuse." He spoke without fear. "I would rather kill myself than strike down my own child." The young man beside him looked at his father in confusion. Zinnies replied irritably, "Is that so? Very well." Then he aggressively raised his cane. "If that's the case, then die. Your wife, your daughter, and that brat. None of them will be spared." As soon as the words ended, all the soldiers surged forward. From today, the baronial family will be officially abolished. In an instant, both Aster and Hefried were tightly surrounded. In that situation, he slowly spoke. "What are you afraid of, ancestor progenitor?" That tone made Zinnies turn angrily. "What?" Aster coldly challenged. A bunch of big men huddled together and trembling. "Pathetic. If you're so afraid of being bitten by your own dog, then go ahead and expel or eliminate me as you wish." He then suddenly loosened his tie. "But if you so much as lay a finger on my family." The action left Hefried standing there stunned. He quickly tore his jacket off. "Sorry, father. I suppose I really can't stay quiet after all." The knights there couldn't help but be surprised. "What is that?" They fumbled, staring at Aster's back. The sigil on his back. The mark on his back suddenly began to glow. "If that happens, this Seven Wings will become an enemy of House Elmheim." Aster coldly glanced at them. "You'd best think this through carefully." Those around were filled with bewilderment. "No way. Wait, isn't that the Seven Wings sigil?" They still couldn't believe their eyes. "Surely it's not a fake? After centuries, that thing appears on a human's body?" But the mark was clearly. Zinnies' voice was also a bit flustered. "You brat. Do you understand the weight of what you're showing us?" Aster turned and replied resolutely. "I understand. I've heard the more wings you have, the more astonishing people find you." Needless to say, Aster's bluntness greatly excited the green-haired Baron. He clapped and laughed loudly. Seeing everyone's attention turn to him, he shrugged and said, "Excuse me. Please continue." On this side, Ginny's began to explain. First, the sigil is a component that produces magical power bestowed upon humans by the spirits in ancient times. By passing that power down from generation to generation, humans have continuously honed its power. Yet until now, no human has ever reached 7 wings, except the spirit race, the ones who created those sigils. Aster retorted, "Are you implying I'm of the spirit race?" He continued, "If your 7 wings is real, then it's very possible." A string of accusations against Aster's position followed, making Hefried extremely worried. Aster spoke up, "I am the son of a baron. Right now I no longer care for my own body. All I want to know now is whether you are ready to confront me. Even if I am expelled from House Elmheim, countless noble houses will rush to welcome this 7 wings. To those always afraid of rebellion like you, that would be a colossal threat. If possible, they'd want to keep me as close as possible. A symbol of 7 wings, even surpassing Grand Duke Roderick." That assertion made everyone else in the room startle. Aster thought inwardly. As the old man said earlier, even Elmheim is not unified. The truth is a rebellion is about to happen. A large-scale civil war will swallow this country. I've seen that future once before. To ensure my baronial family survives what's coming, I want to make clear right here who is ally and who is enemy, even if it means accepting some risks. This somewhat arrogant statement of Aster's amused Jenny's. "Huh? Do you really believe you're worth that much? There's no evidence your 7 wings is real." Aster smiled, his voice sharp. "If you don't believe me, then come and kill me. If you do that, it means war between me and all of you." As he spoke, Aster felt a bit afraid inside. If House Elmheim is truly serious, killing someone like me would require no effort at all. How will they act now? Will they take the bait? Outside, the green-haired Baron clapped his hands once more. Then he stood and joined the conversation. "It seems this discussion is just going in circles. Elder-in-Chief, why don't we set a trial for the brat right here?" Hearing that, the blonde-haired Baron cried out in surprise. "Count Maze, what are you doing?" Maze replied, "You all want to see it too, don't you? The power of 7 wings. Wait and then decide its fate later." He turned to the others and said, "What do you think? This is the territory of the greatest martial house in the world. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 suitable trials nearby." Aster promised with a look toward him, judging, "Count Maze, right? No doubt about it." The corner of Aster's mouth lifted. He's an ally. Hearing that, Ginny's now somewhat agreed. "Good. Then follow me." Teaching a grandson who can't keep his mouth shut is after all a grandfather's duty. They then went to an iron cage overlooking a deep pit. "Is this the trial area? It's too dark," he began to explain. "Behind this darkness is an underground chamber connected to the water conduit system. This place used to be an emergency shelter, but now we're keeping a beast inside. The trial is very simple. Just defeat that beast. That's all." Hefried turned and scolded, "My heavens, the kid is really troublesome. After how many times I've reminded him to keep the existence of 7 wings a secret." Aster turned back and smiled. "I can't hide something so conspicuous forever. This is also a good opportunity." He warned anxiously, "Don't be careless, understood?" Aster then nodded and jumped down. "I'm going." Hefried watched Count Maze with tears in his eyes. At that moment, he gave a somewhat pleased smile. After a few seconds, Aster hit the ground. The place was extremely damp, and indeed it was dark, but not so dark that he couldn't see anything. Aster's gaze suddenly flashed when he saw something. He was startled. "Huh? That's..." Above, Ginny's reminded. "I also gave him a chance to regain his honor, but he only wailed pitifully until the very last moment. I really couldn't stand it anymore." And this is the explanation for Darius's absence. Looking at the beast gnawing on Darius's body, Ginny's continued to admonish, "Don't disappoint me, Brad." Aster, without hesitation, drew his sword and faced the monster alone. When a monster noticed someone approaching, it turned, bared its fangs, and let out a loud roar. Now the trial begins. Aster stared at the giant monster standing before him. The moment he saw it clearly, the rumors people had been whispering finally made sense. They always said the Elmheim family secretly locked magical beasts in the manor. Now, one was towering right in front of him. At that moment, Aster thought something rather surprising. Just this once, I kind of pity you daisies who grew up in this house full of monsters. Suddenly, the creature let out a horrifying roar, the sound reverberating through the hall. Its massive body lunged at Aster with terrifying speed. But Aster didn't flinch. He calmly raised his sword, infused it with magic, then swung in a clean arc, eerily effortless. The blade pierced straight through the creature's body. For a moment, everything froze. The beast was cleaved in two, and its two giant halves collapsed heavily to the floor. The great hall fell into a deadly silence. Many nobles recoiled in horror. But Aster remained as nonchalant as if nothing had happened. He said casually, "Sister Kudo is far scarier than this thing." At that moment, something strange happened. From the creature's corpse, an unnatural dark mist slowly rose. Aster's face immediately stiffened. He had misjudged it. This wasn't a normal magical beast. It was an undead, an immortal monster. Aster's reaction drew his father's attention at once. With obvious worry, he admitted he'd long suspected something extremely dangerous was hidden in the deepest room of the basement. However, the Grand Elder only smiled lightly with calm interest. He began to reveal the truth. This beast was attracted by the scent of fresh blood and death, so it was locked underground. It's the perfect environment for it. There are countless corpses here, but scarier still, this undead cannot be killed by ordinary means. Cutting it or burning it is useless. It was intentionally preserved to serve two purposes: one day to test the strength of a sword, and for now to deal with bodies. Hearing this, a blonde count among the nobles frowned. Capturing an undead alive is extremely difficult. Even veteran knights struggle. Yet the Grand Elder deliberately created one. The Grand Elder's reply was icy. If the brat dies, then it only proves he's a fake. A badge without wings is worth nothing. It's not even fit to be decoration. He added an even more vicious line. Even if he dies, it's still useful. In fact, his death might make things easier. While the conversation continued, the Count quietly observed Aster. After the boy's earlier confident declarations, he couldn't help but hope Aster wouldn't fall so easily. The battle went on. Aster kept colliding with the undead, fighting while watching closely. Something was very wrong with this creature. Each sword strike met almost no resistance, like slashing smoke. And its regeneration was terrifying. The wounds closed as soon as they appeared. Even for an undead, this rate of recovery was abnormal. Aster quickly recalled what the manuals said. They have no life force to completely destroy. There are only two ways: sunlight or a holy weapon. Without either, it's best to avoid fighting. But Aster had no intention of retreating. If he defeated this beast by ordinary means, his title of Seven-Winged would mean nothing. He would prove his power through raw strength. The moment he made that decision, Aster's power erupted. A terrifying pressure burst from his body. The air around him seemed to explode. The surrounding walls crumbled in an instant. The stone floor cracked open, and debris flew everywhere across the great hall. The horrified audience gasped. What kind of magic is this? So this is the power of the Seven-Winged. What's going on down there? That brat really beat it? Questions rang out from above. After the explosion left the entire cage shrouded in dust. Then, as the dust slowly cleared, Aster's body appeared without a single wound. Not a scratch. The Grand Elder clicked his tongue and said, "What a pity." Suddenly the monster raised its colossal foot. Before Aster could react, it slammed its foot down, the ground trembling violently. Aster was buried beneath the creature's enormous foot. His father screamed in panic, but the Count immediately stopped him. "You don't intend to do something as trivial as diving down to save him, Lord Hefried?" His father replied, "Do you really expect me to stand with my arms crossed and watch him die?" Count Maze, seeing his discomfort, spoke to reassure him. "Now, calm down a bit." Then he glanced down with a smile. "Look closely down there. It seems that boy is plotting something in his head." The monster thought it had one, But beneath its foot, Aster was smiling. Everything was unfolding just as he planned. The beast looked a little thinner than before. Aster suddenly surged with strength and thrust his sword upward. The blade plunged deep into the creature's chest. Blood spurted from its mouth, pouring over Aster. In that moment, he knew the process had begun. His tactic was simple: stab again and again, keep stabbing until the creature was truly dead. While watching, Aster's father noticed something strange. The rhythm and movements of Aster felt so familiar, but the more he watched, the more certain he was that this wasn't a technique he'd seen before. This was something entirely different. Then suddenly the whole area began to collapse. The ground shook violently, huge fissures spread, walls fell, structures crumbled, and people panicked. But amid that chaos, the Grand Elder stood motionless. His eyes were locked on Aster, and in that moment he finally understood. This was not ordinary power. This was the true power of the Seven-Winged. In an instant, everything changed completely. The blonde count was flung away like trash, sailed across the great hall, and crashed to the floor, unable even to lift his head. What on earth just happened? The blonde count panicked and stammered. Where did the undead go? Ginny's didn't bother to answer. He only lowered his gaze. The truth was already plain. The immortal undead and the terrifying mana burst had vanished completely, not due to technique or skill, but simply by absolute, overwhelming power. At the bottom of the pit, Aster lay motionless, only faint streams of energy still swirling around his body. Ginny's squinted. This wasn't refinement. This was brute domination, using an incredible quantity of mana and superior quality to force reality to kneel. He turned to Hefried and asked, "Did you do this?" Hefried shook his head, his eyes still fixed on his son. "Sir, even I didn't expect the boy to progress this far." Count May stepped forward, voice full of expectation. "So Aster has passed the trial, then?" Ginny slowly walked through the nobles, tone calm but decisive. "I have no objections." Aster quickly ran to the edge of the pit and shouted, "Aster is done fighting. Come up." Aster's tired voice echoed up from the pit. "The rope's been caught in a whirl. Lower the rope down to me." A while later, in Ginny's private chamber, the air was suffocatingly heavy. Ginny stared at Aster in silence for a moment, then asked, "Are you sure? There won't be a second chance." Aster answered without hesitation, "I'm not interested in the inner household." He calmly explained, "If I stay here, our cousins will never feel secure. So I choose to remain with House Hefried." Ginny snorted softly, still pretending to be modest. His gaze sharpened. "But your ambition, I can see it clearly in your eyes." The room fell silent. Ginny's asked bluntly, "Do you intend to raise your sword against this house, or aim it at Roderick?" Aster stiffened under the overwhelming pressure. Ginny's leaned back and smiled, telling him to relax. "I'm not here to question your motives." Aster remained rigid under the crushing pressure. "Roderick is far too strong now. If your existence can restrain him, I accept." But Ginny's also warned coldly, "If one day you turn your spear on me, the outcome will be clear." Aster quietly nodded in acknowledgement. As he stepped outside, he truly understood. Ginny's was absolutely not someone to be underestimated. Outside, Hefried immediately ran up and asked what had happened. Aster replied, "I was invited into the inner household, but I declined." Hefried sighed heavily. Before the tension could grow, Count Mays interjected with a loud laugh. "What a pity! Your future would be much easier inside the inner household." Aster looked at him. "Then why did you help me earlier?" Mays laughed heartily. "Just testing a brave kid." His tone suddenly grew serious. "From this moment on, you are officially a Seven-Wing." Having said that, he cast a glance to one side. The nobles around fell silent, yet their minds teemed with greed, fear, and calculation. Some wanted to seize the power, some saw him as a threat to eliminate. Others looked for ways to exploit him. Mays placed a hand on Aster's shoulder and smiled. "The title of Seven-Winged is enormously valuable. Many will come seeking you." Aster asked back, "Are you one of them?" Mays smiled. "I am the head of the Knights Academy. Recruiting talent is my duty." Hefried hinted that Aster's guardian sister would likely be thrilled to hear the news. Aster smiled faintly, pointing to the wounds still bandaged. My mother would faint seeing these cuts. Scene shift. A knight knelt before Roderick and reported, "Young Master Darius died in Jenny's trial." Roderick showed no expression, only nodded slightly in acknowledgement, then asked further about Hefried's summons and what had occurred. The knight quickly reported everything. After hearing it all, Roderick calmly said, "The Seven-Winged has returned." The knight exclaimed in shock, "You knew beforehand? If this goes on, the balance of power maintained within the family for so long will collapse. Shouldn't we take action?" he suggested. Roderick sneered, "Let it be. If something as trivial as this could shake Elmheim, Elmheim would have fallen long ago. No rush. The Seven-Winged will eventually belong to me. For now, let Aster grow and see how far he can go." The gates of the Knights Academy opened. On entrance exam day, the candidates crowded in. There were whispers when some people recognized Aster. Everyone was surprised that he had grown into a man. He stood there calm and confident. A young man stepped forward and placed paperwork on the table. It clearly stated, "The state and the Order of Knights will not be responsible for any casualties during the exam." After signing, candidates had to present their wing badge. The instructor asked, "Name?" Aster replied lightly, "Aster of Elmheim." The instructor paused for a second, then snapped his head up. Aster was now a grown young man, smiling faintly, his voice slightly lazy. "My wing badge is a bit hard to show. Can I use my face instead?" As Aster entered the examination hall, the air was tense with ambition and pride. At that moment, a man loudly called his name, drawing everyone's attention. He pointed at Aster with contempt in his voice. "You look strange. I've never seen you before. You must be from some insignificant town. This place isn't for outsiders like you." This hall was filled with the finest nobles, the true elites, all gathered to take the prestigious selection exam to become Knights of the Kingdom. Aster remained composed and replied clearly, "This is where I belong." Hearing that, Vigor flinched, but his surprise quickly turned to anger. He continued, "Everyone here has undergone harsh, rigorous training. Yet they persist in pursuing the dream of walking the glorious path of the elite by retaking the exam repeatedly." He sneered, pointing at the small sword at Aster's hip. "A brand new kid holding a sword like that dares to stand here? This is not the playground for an amateur swordsman like you. If you're just sightseeing, go home." Those nearby whispered familiarly, "It's Vigor again. Every year he bullies the newcomers like this." Amid the murmurs, two people turned their attention to Aster. They realized the target might not be ordinary. "Isn't that someone from Elm, the rumor says?" They whispered, "You know, that's Aster Seven-Wing from the rumor." The name instantly tightened the atmosphere. Vigor repeated in astonishment, "Seven-Wing." At that moment, someone from behind stepped forward, recognizing Aster and surprised, "Finally, I know who you are." The newcomer was Girion. He smiled slyly and said, "Long time no see, cousin. Since no one knows where or when you were born, I'll take the liberty of calling you cousin." Aster replied, "About Darius, I'm sorry to hear that." Girion shrugged unconcerned. "No, you needn't worry. One who disgraced the family deserved to die. Now that he's dead, I feel relieved. Though only a year older than me, he always bossed people around and acted arrogantly. To me, he was just a nuisance. Whether the Seven-Wing title is real or fake, don't underestimate those of the main line, because here no one will protect you anymore." After hearing Girion, people began to gossip. "Two people from Elmheim are participating this year? That's really bad luck." They added, "They're still fiercely conflicted between the main house and the branch house. No one wants to get involved in that dangerous business." Realizing Aster was from Elmheim, Vigor became alarmed. You really are Elmheim?" Aster smiled, extended his hand calmly and modestly, and said, "Pleasure to meet you. Just call me Aster." The scene shifted to the first test location. The atmosphere grew tense and expectant. From the highest position, Hoster loudly addressed the candidates. "You who have made it this far, I commend your courage and patriotism." Hoster emphasized, "The kingdom's Knights of Freezer are not like provincial country knights. We serve the king directly, protect the king, and are the glorious blade, ready to sacrifice our lives for him. Therefore, there is no place here for a useless sword. Show your true worth. Treat today's exam as a battlefield." Hearing that, Aster smiled faintly, though sweat dotted his face. He thought to himself, "His words sound ridiculous, yet I cannot deny their meaning. At last I'm back here." The path to becoming a kingdom knight, the path that was once denied to me when I was wingless. Ahead lay a world of power that had once been entirely beyond my reach. At the pinnacle of that world sat one ruler, the High Commander of the Kingdom's Knights, Roderick A. Elmheim. With burning determination, Aster vowed inwardly, "Just wait, Roderick. I'll catch up to you in the shortest time. But first I must pass this selection exam." Hoster's voice echoed everywhere with authority. "It is time to begin," he announced without hesitation. First test, the Arrow Tower Challenge. The moment the words ended, the air shifted violently. From unseen directions, arrows flew like rain. They struck candidates with ruthless precision. One was hit in the eye and collapsed instantly. The surprise and brutality of the attack stunned the crowd. Aster stood frozen, witnessing the horror. Hoster remained calm and continued. "The last one standing will be the victor." Immediately, thousands of arrows began to rain down from every direction. The sky seemed hostile as the arrow storm poured forth. Many were struck immediately and fell. Panic spread like wildfire. The remaining candidates started to flee in a survival frenzy. Amid the chaos, desperate cries rang out. Someone shouted in confusion, "What do we do now?" Another screamed, "Run! Standing still means certain death." A few tried to organize. Everyone, group up, shield each other, block the incoming arrows. From above, Hoster watched calmly as predicted. Those retaking from last year know how to react. But even so, the survival rate is only about 30%. These measures are only superficial and will soon reach their limits. What I want to see is exceptional problem-solving ability, the sort of thing only those who bear the wing badge can accomplish. Amid the chaos, Aster stood motionless. He neither ran nor immediately defended. As arrows tore the battlefield around him, Vigor saw this and, angry and baffled, said, "What the idiot's standing still for?" As he fainted from fear, Girion, not far away, smirked, "Pathetic. Stand there and die like a hedgehog." Suddenly, Aster moved. With clear intent, he drew his sword. A bright red aura burst from his body, radiating tremendous power and might. Every incoming arrow was easily repelled by him. The sight astonished everyone. The onlookers could hardly believe their eyes. He deflected all those arrows. A faint smile appeared on Aster's lips. Instead of retreating or merely defending, he embraced the challenge with total dominance. "Go ahead, shoot everything at me." Aster stood alone amid the endless rain of arrows speeding toward him, yet not a single arrow could touch him. Vigor, witnessing that terrifying sight, was completely shaken. Shock and horror gripped him. He stared at Aster, his mouth stammering incoherently. "What kind of monster is that? What is he?" Recognizing that no arrow could pierce him, the judge standing at a distance also observed everything. He showed clear astonishment, but unlike Vigor, the judge's reaction carried interest and delight. He carefully analyzed Aster's power and concluded that he was rotating released mana to form a powerful aura. The precision and control behind this technique were truly impressive. He seemed to have enveloped himself in a raging storm. Gradually, the fierce red energy storm began to subside. The trainees around watched in fear, mixed with amazement. Has it stopped? Is it over? As the dust settled, the judge took stock of the situation. Many candidates who should have died had survived in a strange way. This result impressed him with its overwhelming momentum. He noted that more candidates survived than expected, but it was fine. He praised their courage and told them to look around at the bodies strewn about. Those who still stand have officially passed the first test. Giving them no time to rest, he immediately ordered, "Follow me to the next test site." Among them, Vigor panted, still trembling. He complained, "Oh, what a devilish judge," even though he just endured a constant rain of arrows. On the other hand, Aster remained calm, a faint smile on his lips as he looked at Vigor. "Are you tired?" Aster's indifferent composure only made Vigor angrier. "How can you be so calm? What the hell did we just go through?" From above, the judge continued to watch Aster intently. He studied him with interest. He released a huge amount of mana without showing any sign of fatigue. So this is Aster of the Seven Wing. With growing anticipation, he was eager to see more, especially the style of combat Aster would display in the next stage. In the crowd, Girion's gaze remained fixed on Aster. His face hardened as memories surged back. He recalled what his mother had said before this exam. You must stop Aster at all costs. It's about the future of our Elmheim family. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. As Gurion thought, tension rose within. After a while, the next phase of the test began. The judge stood before all candidates and announced a new rule to ensure fairness. Everyone will use identical swords. He ordered, exchange your current weapons before the trial begins. Vigor, hearing this, was annoyed. Why such a troublesome rule? Aster calmly asked. Was it different in previous exams? Vigor explained. For mid-ranking knights like us, the sword we use are usually the same, so there's not much difference. Vigor explained. For mid-ranking knights like us, the sword we use are usually the same, so there's not much difference. He implied that Aster's special sword was under suspicion because of its uniqueness or potential danger. Aster listened to every detail, showing little emotion. At that moment, Gurion stepped up from behind, his tone calm, but mocking. Cousin, have you tamed yourself a retainer? Vigor immediately flew into a rage and shouted. Who's your subordinate? Gurion only smiled, keeping his composure. If I recall correctly, you're the heir of Baron Smite's family, right? Then with a slight but sharp smile, he leaned close and whispered a threatening line. A third-rate country noble like you dares to side against me? If so, you'll face severe consequences. After saying this, Gurion turned and left, leaving a heavy tension in the air. Vigor was shaken. His initial confidence vanished completely, replaced by fear. Young Master Gurion, I have nothing to do with him. Watching the exchange, Aster couldn't help but force a smile. He thought to himself, this is getting awkward. The atmosphere around them had clearly changed, becoming much tenser and more uneasy. All the candidates moved to the next test site. The judge began to explain the rules for the second exam. The first test was offense and defense. This time you'll be divided into 3 teams and compete to occupy the enemy camps in the forest. Aster and the other trainees listened attentively. The judge continued. Raising your team's flag on the dais inside a camp counts as occupying it. The team that controls 2 or more camps when the evening bell rings will be the winner. Note that you may not destroy or steal flags. However, aside from that, no actions are prohibited. The swords issued to you essentially permit you to kill your opponents. Shortly after, the judge announced the team assignments. Now we will announce the member lists of the teams who will face each other in the test. Gurion's team will take the red flag. The white-haired trainee's team will take the yellow flag. Aster's team will take the blue flag. The 3 teams were all ready to fight for victory. When the test began, Aster saw a smoke signal rise into the sky. He informed his teammates. The smoke signal marks the start of the trial. Each camp has 3 flags, and to win you must occupy 2 or more camps, including your own. Vigor gradually understood the situation. Only one of the 3 teams can pass this test. Aster nodded in confirmation, but he sensed his teammates' anxiety. The others, already uneasy, pointed out, does this mean we'll have to fight the Elmheim family? That's going to be tough. Aster felt awkward hearing that. Vigor, clearly afraid, explained, don't you get it? We're afraid of Elmheim's revenge. The opponent is the heir of the main house. Even if it's just a test, striking him with a sword could ruin our futures. In the worst case, we might never dare to call ourselves knights again. Even our families and retainers could be massacred. No one wants to become the enemy of such a powerful house. So, are you planning to forfeit this contest? Is it worth continuing the trial? There will be other exams in the future. Better that than betting your whole life. Vigor forced a smile and said, you probably don't understand the feelings of weak people like us. Aster ran forward. He hadn't expected to be isolated in this team battle format. At the same time, he understood their fear. To knights, the Elmheim house was an authoritarian family that could not be opposed, and Gurion was the symbol of that terrifying domination. When Aster recalled Vigor's remark about not understanding the weak, he reflected on his own position. From outsiders' perspectives, he was still regarded as part of that family. Even so, he noticed everything around him was too quiet. No battles had started, making him wonder whether people were being cautious or if something else was happening. As he entered the competition area, he was startled. The captain of the yellow flag team had been there already. He stood with his flag, as if Aster coming alone had been anticipated. Oh, I didn't think you'd dare come here alone. Everything happened just as he had said. Aster was embarrassed, especially when he noticed the opponent had lowered his camp's flag. Who is he? The yellow-haired trainee said casually, I just happen to have a bit of free time. Then he tossed his flag into the air and declared, I want you to stay and be my companion for a while. Aster was astonished, not understanding the meaning behind the action. The yellow-haired trainee drew his sword, signaling the start of the confrontation. What on earth is this supposed to mean? At the same time, elsewhere in the forest, a large alliance had formed. Gurian's red flag team and the yellow flag team had joined hands with the common goal of defeating Aster. Gurian smiled confidently. I'll show you, cousin, how the Elmheim house truly fights. Aster stepped forward and asked plainly, the opponent is definitely the yellow team. So why are you flying the red flag like that? The yellow-haired man replied calmly. The reason is simple. Elmheim and I have formed an alliance. Having said that, he began to release an imposing aura from his sword. The atmosphere around them immediately grew tense and heavy. A mysterious observer appeared and clarified his identity. He is the eldest son of the Nolan family, a house famed as the founder of the royal swordsmanship. His name is Christopher Nolan. He bears the 5-winged sigil. The observer continued. In the first test, he was overshadowed by the 7-winged genius, so he didn't stand out much. But in the Arrow Tower trial, only 2 people passed without changing expression. Those were Aster the 7-winged and Christopher Nolan the 5-winged. Both are outstanding talents from Caballero with terrifying potential. It's a pity that 2 such gifted people have to face each other in this situation. Upon hearing this, Aster immediately asked, This is an alliance with Elmheim, right? Do you truly understand what you're doing? Even if you do this, in the end, only one team will win. Christopher calmly blocked Aster's attack and said, I understand completely. And because Elmheim stands with us, I've decided the main family will be the winning team. He went on to explain, Perhaps right now my teammates are heading with Elmheim to attack your base. Hearing that, Aster suddenly felt danger surge in his chest, thinking the situation had turned bad. Smith and the others were in serious danger. He faced Christopher and asked, Gurian threatened you, didn't he? He said something like if you dare oppose Elmheim then. Christopher stepped forward without hesitation. No one deliberately stands in front of a speeding cart knowing they'll be crushed. As noble knights living in a strict class society, such actions are only natural. As he spoke, he launched a powerful attack filled with overwhelming force, declaring, This is also the natural conduct a noble should display. Aster tried to block the blow, but even while defending, he felt the pressure slipping beyond control. Seeing his sword snapped, Aster realized something was wrong and thought, This sword definitely has a problem. Could the judge earlier have intentionally given me a faulty item? In the next instant, his sword suddenly snapped in two. But Christopher did not stop. He pressed the attack with great force and confidently declared, Don't worry, our fight from start to finish is merely an honorable duel between 2 nobles. He continued, I never like people of Elmheim, especially show-offs like. Christopher ruthlessly shattered Aster's sword and kept attacking relentlessly, not giving him a moment to breathe. Aster was driven into a passive position amid overwhelming circumstances, but in the next instant, he quickly regained his composure. He grabbed the broken piece of sword, channeled energy into it, and suddenly launched a powerful strike forward. Christopher easily raised his sword to block. In that momentary lapse, Christopher suddenly noticed Aster turning and running away. Christopher shouted in astonishment, You're really running? Wait, Aster didn't stop. Running, he glanced back and said, We'll leave our duel for later. Right now I have someone else to deal with. Christopher sneered and mocked. So you're afraid after all? You don't even deserve to be called knight. After that, Christopher picked up the broken sword from the ground, examined it closely, and wondered, What kind of sword is this? Even for a cheap blade, the quality is far too poor. He realized something was off, paused, ran his hand through his hair, and murmured, I get it. This is Elmheim's trick. They dare to play dirty to spoil the fun. At the same time, on the other side, Aster ran back to his territory and shouted immediately, Smite, are you okay? Before he received an answer, a familiar voice rang out. You arrived earlier than I expected. Cousin, the man standing there was Grian, the one behind the whole plan. He calmly said that everything happening in this trial had been carefully arranged by him. Gurian kept boasting that he alone would be enough, which made me somewhat look forward to him. How are things on your side? We just taken a third base over here, right? For now, you could call this absolute domination. But before he finished, Aster cut in, Grian, what have you done to my teammates? His question made Grian a little irritated. Oh, that? His teammates pointed their swords at him with hostility and said, "Don't blame me. From the start I said I wouldn't follow you, didn't I? I won't join a fool who opposes Elmheim." Brian laughed heartily in delight. "Ha ha ha. Those guys didn't even bother to resist a bit. Even if they're country bumpkin monkeys, they still have enough sense to know which side to take." Aster replied calmly. "Do you really think that merely gathering enough numbers will let you beat me? No, not at all. You're completely wrong, little brother. I'm certain to win. The winning condition of this offense and defense battle is to hold 2 or more bases when the contest ends. Even if you desperately run to plant flags at other bases right now, you no longer have enough people to guard those flags. We just wait for you to leave for another base, then casually replace it with a red flag. 2 bases are required. As long as we hold that, we'll win." Aster tightened his grip on his sword and threatened, "Then I'll stop you from carrying out that plan by cutting all of you down here." The faces of the surrounding soldiers went pale at once, but Girion laughed triumphantly. "It's all bluster. That sword is useless now, right? Even if you have 7 wings, without a weapon you're like a bird with broken wings. Or do you intend to fight all of us here by yourself?" Aster still smiled and confidently drew another sword. "Impressive." He tossed the sword behind him and continued, "You planned this more thoroughly than I expected." Seeing that, Girion immediately grinned with triumph. "I'm certain to win." But contrary to his expectation, the moment the sword touched the ground, Aster's eyes narrowed as he prepared to act. Everything now seemed to be in Girion's hands. Aster only sighed softly. "This situation is indeed quite troublesome. You really impressed me, Girion." Witnessing that, Girion immediately roared with joy. "We've won." But the next instant, as Aster's sword slid from his hand and fell, he suddenly released an explosive burst of energy. His body bent slightly, then he unleashed a counterstrike with terrifying force. The blow was so powerful, it sent Vigor flying far away, knocking the sword from his hand. Seizing the once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity, Aster nimbly grabbed that sword and unleashed an attack that devastated both front and rear. With a single strike, everyone present in the area collapsed in stunned silence. Watching the whole scene from above, Guan could only cry out in horror, "What?" Aster coldly pointed the tip of his sword at him. His voice was as sharp as ice. "Even so, you made the mistake of standing between me and intervening. Now you'll pay." At that moment, Aster appeared in an incredibly cool and menacing stance. Girion gritted his teeth. "You damned monster." Meanwhile, a massive amount of energy began to gather at Aster's feet. In the blink of an eye, he moved with unimaginable speed, closing the distance instantly. Aster raced through the air, heading straight for Girion like an arrow tearing the wind. Girion gasped, glanced back, and exclaimed in disbelief, "No way, he can fly here?" Aster looked him dead in the eye and said coldly, "You're too slow. Now you can't escape." In the next instant, Aster launched a direct attack. Girion frantically used his sword to block, but the force behind Aster's strike was overwhelmingly powerful. His sword shattered on impact. At that moment, Aster's mind drifted back to a memory. "I remember the first day I learned to fly. Perhaps it wasn't that I couldn't do it before, but that now I could truly feel it. The omnipotent sensation of manipulating magic and closing every distance. The omnipotent sensation of manipulating magic and closing every distance." Girion opened his mouth to reply, but Aster cut him off. He grabbed him and yanked him forcefully downward. "But to me now it's very small." A faint smile appeared on his lips, and the next instant both plummeted to the ground. A massive explosion shook the area. Dust and smoke billowed up, leaving the witnesses completely shocked. Vigor stammered in despair. "What kind of fight is this? What happened to those two?" The others standing nearby were equally stunned, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Through the thick dust, a figure gradually emerged, dragging someone across the ground. As the silhouette drew nearer, everyone realized it was Aster. He was dragging Girion, who was now completely defeated and showed no will to resist. Aster brutally threw him to the ground and muttered, "That must hurt." Girion tried to speak. "What are all of you doing? Standing there like idiots? Hurry up and finish this one off. That's an order from the Elmheim family." Girion tried to say, "What are all of you doing? Standing there like idiots?" Aster looked at him calmly. "Are you that afraid of Elmheim's retaliation?" Vigor tightened his grip on his sword, his voice full of rage and bitterness. "Of course. Our house is nothing but a third-rate noble family, one that could disappear in an instant if they chose." They would crush us into nothing. So for weak nobles like us to survive in this world, no matter how cowardly, we have no choice but to submit and avoid offending those above us. He shouted in despair. Someone who possesses everything like you will never understand our fears. Hearing those words, Aster only smiled. Seeing him smile like that, Vigor grew even angrier. What the hell are you laughing at? Seeing him smile like that, Vigor grew even angrier. What the hell are you laughing at? I have my own objections to that, but right now, I am the one with the authority. That's why there are things only I can do. Aster raised his voice fiercely. My enemy is Elmheim. If you cannot do it, then I will. I will change that. A proud and oppressive Elmheim of today. I will smash it and rebuild everything. Those declarations fell the crowd into horrified silence. They were completely shaken, unable to believe what they had just heard. They were utterly shocked, unable to believe what they had just heard. What the hell are you talking about? Vigor asked tremblingly. Do you understand what you're saying? Do you grasp its true meaning? Aster looked him straight in the eye without hesitation. Yes. This is a declaration of war. He continued in a firm yet powerful voice. No matter how obedient and devoted they are to a proud Elmheim now, what awaits them at the end of that loyalty is betrayal and a miserable death. If they do not want that fate, then there's only one path: fight. Aster shifted his stance slightly and added, the seven-winged I bear on my back. They are power forged for that purpose. So now you choose. His gaze swept over everyone present. Which Elmheim will you follow? Him or me? Girion shouted angrily. Don't talk nonsense. That will never be allowed. I will remember each and every one of you. Any of you who dares betray me will face the consequences. Hearing those threats, Vigor began to panic. Sweat poured down his face as fear and uncertainty took hold of his mind. He couldn't decide which side was right for him and his family. The pressure of choice weighed heavily on his shoulders. But then, as if having made up his mind, in a moment he suddenly threw down his sword and stepped forward toward Aster. You really will defeat him, won't you? If you're only deceiving us and nothing changes afterward, then I will be the one to despise you. At this time, he was also holding the green flag. Hearing that, Aster made his promise without hesitation. And immediately, Vigor Smith raised the green flag high and declared clearly, Vigor Smith, eldest son of the Smiths, I will follow and support Aster Elmheim. The crowd murmured. No way, did he really say that? Another added. But with this, Girion's plan will completely collapse. The anger in Girion's eyes now flared into uncontrollable rage. He hissed, You damn commoner. After all that, Vigor stepped forward, his voice echoing across the area. What are you all still standing there for? Now is the chance to show those arrogant Elmheims what we're made of. Put everything on the seven-winged. Those words sounded grand and inspiring. But instead of acting immediately, the others only looked at one another, unsure of what to do next. The energy was there, but direction was still lacking. Observing the events unfolding, Aster thought to himself, one down. At least now, I don't have to plant flags all by myself. But this is still not enough. I need more allies if I want to overthrow Elmheim. But this is still not enough. I need more allies if I want to overthrow Elmheim. Not far away, Girion sat silently as a tense atmosphere settled over him. Suddenly, someone anxiously stepped forward and asked, Are you all right, Girion? But before the person could get close, Girion roughly shoved him away and shouted, Don't touch me, you useless trash. His anger had reached its peak. Thoughts blazed in his head. Overthrow Elmheim. How dare a petty branch like you? If I let him continue his rampage, I will have no face left to show the main family. I'm not like my brother. I can't let this end here. Driven by that fury, Girion began trying to activate the power of the four-wing. But at that moment, a voice rang out from behind, casual yet cutting, slicing through the atmosphere. What's going on, Elmheim? You look rather pathetic for someone I haven't seen in a long time. As Girion hurriedly explained the situation to him, the irritation on the newcomer's face only deepened. What the hell have you been doing all this time? Dealing with him should have been your job, right? But even as he spoke, a dark, calculating thought flashed through Girion's mind. Perfect. I still have him on my side. His winged emblem may not match the seven-winged, but when it comes to swordsmanship, he's certainly stronger than anyone here. With that thought, Girion's confidence rose again. He ordered with authority, Hurry, tear him to pieces. But in the next second, something completely unexpected happened. something no one present could have imagined. Christopher suddenly stepped forward and slammed a red flag into Girian's face before calmly saying, "I've come to return this. As I thought, your methods run counter to my chivalry principles. In other words, I will break this alliance." Those words were more painful than any blade. Girian stood stunned, collapsing to the ground, unable to process what had just happened. Around them, whispers of shock spread. "Are you kidding me? Even the Nolan family betrays us." Another worried voice. "I don't even know which side to take." The situation descended into chaos. Alliances shattered, trust collapsed. Amid the turmoil, Christopher calmly drew his sword. The cold ring of steel cut through the tension as he said confidently, "Well, it seems we're back to square one. You don't really think you can pass this trial without settling things with me first, Aster?" Christopher continued, pride evident in his stance. "The proud swordsmanship of House Nolan versus your seven-winged. The proud swordsmanship of House Nolan versus your seven-winged." Their eyes locked, and then, in an instant, the battle began. Christopher struck first, rushing in with incredible speed. His blade tore through the air. "Let's see who the superior one truly is," Aster replied in a steady voice. "No, that will have to wait." The next instant he moved, launching his own attack directly at Christopher. Christopher immediately noticed the difference when their blades met. His sharp eyes analyzed Aster's movements and thought, "This person is completely different from before." At that moment, his sword was forced into the ground. Aster's strike landed heavily, leaving a deep groove along the blade. Quickly regaining his balance, Christopher looked up and said, "Have you forgotten? Only one team can pass this trial. If both of us aim to become royal knights, then we have no choice but to settle it right here." Aster's expression did not waver. Instead, he answered calmly, "That will be a problem for me, Nolan." For a brief moment, the tension shifted. Then Aster said something no one expected. "I also want you to become a royal knight." Christopher blinked in surprise. "What?" Aster lowered his stance and began to explain. "You rallied everyone to overthrow Elmheim, so it would be wrong for me to ask you to give up that dream just because we're on different teams, right?" He paused briefly to let the words sink in, then added, "I have a plan to ensure everyone here passes." This time, it wasn't only Christopher who was shocked. Girian was equally stunned. Whispers began spreading through the group. Vigor was the first to speak. "Everyone? No way you can do that." Aster slowly lowered his sword. "I can't guarantee it for certain, but I'm confident. I need everyone's cooperation to make it happen." With that, Aster strode straight toward Girian. Seeing him approach, Girian instinctively tensed, fear evident in his eyes. But instead of attacking, Aster simply reached out to him and said calmly, "So, the first thing to do is make peace, Girian." And then the scene changed completely. Now, all the visible flags were gathered together. When the judge arrived and saw that, his reaction was extreme. "What is this? You don't even know how to plant a flag." Amid the tension, Aster stepped forward and answered in a calm voice. "The winning condition is to occupy at least 2 camps. But since we were never informed that only one team may plant a flag at a single camp, we decided to form an alliance of 3 teams and occupy all the camps together." His explanation was clear and logical, but it was not something the judge was willing to accept easily. On the contrary, his anger only grew. "So you want me to pass all of you? Are you making a mockery of this exam?" Nearby, Vigor could feel the tension tightening around them. His whole body went rigid as he muttered, "I knew it wouldn't work." Beside him, Girian shook his head. "Of course not. No twisted logic like that could pass." Nearby, Vigor could feel the tension tightening around them. His whole body went rigid as he muttered, "I knew it wouldn't work." Beside him, Girian shook his head. "Of course not. No twisted logic like that could pass." Aster looked the judge straight in the eye without hesitation. "What if that enemy is more valuable alive than dead?" The answer seemed only to further enrage the judge. He declared firmly, "A knight is the sword of the nation. Judging it is not your duty, Aster." But Aster did not back down. Instead, he stepped forward a little and said, "So you intend to strip us of the right to compete? But since we haven't violated any rules, wouldn't that decision be you overstepping the bounds of a judge's authority?" Those words carried a different weight. For a moment, even the judge was taken aback and could not respond immediately. Aster didn't stop there. He stepped closer and spoke in a low, calculating tone. Moreover, if everyone fails because of this, I wonder whether the main family would really let this go. That remark changed everything. The tension in the air shifted to hesitation. Shortly after, the entire scene moved to a different area. Now, everyone had gathered elsewhere to wait. Vigor sat across from Aster, clearly restless. So the great judge went to consult his superiors, and we've been waiting here for an hour already. Are we really going to be okay? Don't tell me we're actually all going to fail. Aster remained unusually relaxed, but he answered in a gentle tone. Who knows? At least we showed them this is worth discussing. Not far away, others lingered around Gurion, still uncertain about everything that had happened. Lowering his voice, Vigor added, Still, I'm surprised that rich young master actually agreed to cooperate. Exactly what did you say to him? Aster merely shrugged and waved it off. Nothing much. At that moment, a loud voice rang out, drawing everyone's attention. Immediately, everyone's focus turned forward. The judge stood before them, as imposing as ever, and announced in a clear, loud voice. Headmistress Mia will now announce the exam results. Listen carefully.